Picture this exact moment in your mind. It is 8:32 a.m. on Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. I step into Conference Room D on the 7th floor of Apex Infrastructure Systems in Austin, Texas. Sitting at the head of the oak table is Julian Thorne, our brand new Chief Technology Officer. He has been with us for 9 weeks, wearing a navy blue fleece vest and an expression of corporate superiority. Right next to him sits Sandra Higgins, Senior Director of Human Resources, holding a leather folder open on the table. Every experienced professional who has spent over a decade in corporate America knows that look. It is the calculated posture management adopts right before they trim your responsibilities or push you out the door. But what Julian Thorne did not know was that I had been carrying a board-signed legal document in a fireproof file cabinet at home for 10 years. A document that was about to turn this entire conference room upside down and cost the enterprise millions of dollars. My name is Bradley Vance. By March 2025, I had been working at Apex for 13 years. We were a mid-sized software infrastructure firm with 1,200 employees, handling data integrations for enterprise clients. I joined Apex back in October 2011 as a Level 2 systems administrator. My official job description stated that my responsibilities were server maintenance, user account management, and handling Tier 3 support escalations. My starting salary in 2011 was $68,000 per year. Over 13 years of performance reviews, my compensation grew to $134,000 base salary, plus a 12% annual bonus. However, an employee's actual work almost never matches their formal job description. When you stay at an organization for over 10 years, especially in core infrastructure, you absorb vital operational duties nobody else knows how to handle. It begins small. You fix a broken software pipeline outside your lane because it blocks your morning tasks. Before you realize it, you become the sole human architect holding the entire operational backbone together. I was that exact person at Apex. Let me give you concrete examples. In 2014, our software release process was a complete disaster. Pushing code to production clusters was manual, requiring 3 engineers to sit on bridge calls for 6 hours every release night. On my own initiative, working evenings and weekends, I architected and built a customized, fully automated continuous deployment pipeline. I wrote custom orchestration scripts, automated validation routines, and failover mechanisms. That single project transformed our release cycle from 6 hours of manual labor into an automated daily release, taking less than 12 minutes. Nobody ordered me to build that deployment pipeline. That custom pipeline saved Apex 40 hours of senior engineering labor every week, over 2,000 hours a year. Calculating engineering time at $80 per hour, my pipelines saved Apex over $160,000 in direct operational labor costs every single year for 10 years. Then there was our infrastructure monitoring system. In 2016, our monitoring setup was a patchwork of disconnected utilities. When a server failed, engineers spent 20 minutes trying to identify the broken cluster. Taking initiative, I spent months building a centralized real-time telemetry dashboard with custom log aggregators and predictive failure algorithms. Our mean time to detection for critical outages dropped from 17 minutes to under 3 minutes. Furthermore, over 13 years, I became the sole point of contact for every critical vendor powering our cloud platform, including Amazon Web Services, Cloudflare Edge Security, and our data center provider. In 2022, when our Amazon Web Services contract came up for renewal, I analyzed our usage metrics and restructured our reserved instance commitments, saving Apex $340,000 over 3 years. Yet on paper and human resources files, I was still classified as a Level 2 systems administrator. My original boss, founding Chief Technology Officer Franklin Miller, understood my value completely. During reviews, Franklin would tell me, "Bradley, you are the quiet backbone holding this entire infrastructure together." He protected me and ensured IRESTA received raises ranging from 4 to 7% every year. However, Franklin Miller retired in December 2024, and that was when Julian Thorne arrived to take over as Chief Technology Officer. Julian Thorne was 34 years old, 8 years younger than me, and brought an attitude of executive arrogance that alienated senior engineers. Boasting a Master of Business Administration from Stanford University, Julian spoke fluent corporate buzzwords, talking endlessly about operational efficiency, role optimization, and staying in designated lanes. In January 2025, Julian conducted operational reviews across engineering teams, asking probing questions. Who owns the continuous deployment pipeline? Who manages Cloudflare Edge security? Who built the monitoring dashboard? Who negotiates cloud instance reservations? Every single time Julian asked those questions, department heads gave him the exact same answer. Bradley Vance. I could see the visible irritation growing on Julian Thorne's face. As a rigid bureaucrat, he simply could not comprehend how a single systems administrator possessed so much direct operational authority over enterprise systems. In his narrow MBA mindset, no single engineer should hold that much control without formal managerial oversight. Which brings us right back to Tuesday morning, March 18th, 2025, at 8:32 a.m. in Conference Room D. Bradley. "Thank you for meeting with us today," Julian said, offering a tight corporate smile. "Take a seat." Sandra Higgins slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward me. "We are executing a comprehensive role clarity audit," Sandra explained smoothly. "We are ensuring that every employee's daily responsibilities align precisely with their official job description." I picked up the document. It was a printout of my original Level 2 Systems Administrator job description from October 2011. The highlighted points read: server patch deployment, user account management, hardware maintenance, and Tier 3 support escalations. Julian Thorne leaned forward. "Bradley, you have accumulated responsibilities that fall entirely outside your official job description. You are managing our deployment pipeline, enterprise vendor contracts, monitoring tools, and cloud architecture. Frankly, that is an unorganized structure. Next month, we are bringing in a new DevOps manager named Trevor Blake. Trevor will take over ownership of the deployment pipeline and monitoring dashboard. Vendor relationships will roll directly up to my office. You will spend the next 4 weeks transitioning all access and scripts over to Trevor's team." A profound quiet settled over my mind. In that instant, absolute clarity washed over me. "So, Julian," I said softly, "you are ordering me to immediately stop managing all systems, pipelines, and vendor contracts that are not explicitly written on this 2011 job description sheet." Julian smiled with patronizing satisfaction. "Exactly, Bradley. We want you to focus strictly on what you were hired to do. Stick to your job description. You will still have core work, user accounts, server patching, and help desk escalations." Sandra Higgins added, "To be clear, Bradley, your title and salary remain exactly the same. We are simply realigning your operational duties." I looked at Julian Thorne for 3 seconds, absorbed his smug arrogance, and nodded slowly. "Understood," I replied calmly. "If you want me to stick strictly to my official job description, I will stick strictly to my job description starting right now." Julian blinked, surprised. "Excellent," he said, visibly relieved. "Sandra will send over the formal transition documentation." I stood up, picked up my coffee mug, and walked calmly out of Conference Room D. What Julian Thorne, Sandra Higgins, and the executive team did not know was that back in Q2 2015, a critical event had occurred that changed everything. In May 2015, after I deployed the automated release pipeline and saved hundreds of thousands of dollars, founding Chief Technology Officer Franklin Miller realized the company faced immense key person dependency. Franklin went directly to our board of directors and proposed a formal key person retention agreement. The board of directors approved the proposal. On June 12, 2015, a legal document titled Key Person Retention and Intellectual Property Assignment Agreement was executed. Signed by Chief Technology Officer Franklin Miller, Chairwoman of the Board of Directors Eleanor Wright, and myself. The legal terms embedded within that agreement were extraordinary and ironclad, under Delaware General Corporation Law and federal copyright statutes. Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106. The contract explicitly stipulated that any custom software tools, deployment automation pipelines, telemetry monitoring dashboards, or infrastructure code authored by Bradley Vance outside the narrow duties of his official 2011 Systems Administrator job description remain the exclusive intellectual property of Bradley Vance. Under the agreement, Apex was granted a non-exclusive operational license to use my custom software tooling. However, the agreement contained two devastating legal clauses. First, Apex was strictly prohibited from transferring or redelegating the management or operational control of my custom intellectual property to any other employee without my express advance written consent. Second, if Apex attempted to alter my operational scope, reassign my custom tooling, or terminate my employment, Apex was legally required to either negotiate a fair market value intellectual property buyout, defined as a minimum payment equal to 3 times the documented annual operational cost savings generated by the tools, or immediately cease all utilization of my custom deployment pipelines and monitoring software. When Franklin Miller retired in December 2024, he handed me a certified copy of the board agreement, telling me, "Bradley, keep this document locked in a safe place." Arrogant executives come and go, but this agreement ensures nobody can exploit your life's work without paying what you are worth. I had placed that signed contract inside my fireproof home safe 10 years ago. Until Tuesday morning, March 18th, 2025, at 8:32 a.m., when Julian Thorne arrogantly commanded me to stick to my job description. I returned to my desk on the 7th floor and executed Julian Thorne's instructions with absolute compliance. I updated my Slack status too, available strictly for user account creation, server patching, and Tier 3 support escalations. I revoked my administrative API keys from the custom deployment pipeline repository. I stopped running automated nightly optimization scripts that managed our Amazon Web Services cloud infrastructure. I disabled my monitoring hooks that tracked database cluster latency. I ceased reviewing Cloudflare Edge security logs, and I completely halted all direct communication with enterprise cloud vendors. When automated alerts or vendor emails arrived in my inbox, I set up an automated email rule routing every single infrastructure notification directly to Julian Thorne's inbox. Then I sat back, took a sip of coffee, and waited. It took exactly 6 days for the chaos to erupt. On Monday, March 24th at 11:43 a.m., Garrett Scott, a senior software engineer, sent me an urgent Slack message. "Garrett, Scott, Bradley, the deployment pipeline just threw a failure code on the production push for the Davenport integration project. The build runner is frozen. Can you log into the server and fix the queue? We have a hard deadline today, Bradley Vance." "Hello, Garrett. I am unable to assist with the deployment pipeline. Per the Executive Role Clarification Directive issued by CTO Julian Thorne on March 18th, managing the deployment pipeline falls entirely outside my official job description. You will need to contact Julian Thorne directly or wait for incoming DevOps manager Trevor Blake next month, Garrett Scott." "Wait, Bradley, are you serious? The Davenport integration is a $7.4 million contract. If we do not push this code by 2 p.m. today, we miss our milestone. Can't you patch the script real quick?" Bradley Vance: "I am under strict corporate orders from Julian Thorne to stick exclusively to my 2011 job description duties. Please escalate all deployment pipeline issues directly to CTO Julian Thorne." Garrett Scott escalated our exchange up his management chain. At 1:14 p.m., my desk phone rang. Julian Thorne was on the line. "This is Bradley Vance. Bradley," Julian shouted, his voice laced with agitation. "What is going on with the deployment pipeline?" "Garrett Scott says the production release is completely stalled." "I have no idea what the specific error is, Julian," I replied smoothly. "I am not monitoring the deployment system." Julian snapped. "Jump onto the server and fix it immediately. We have a major release scheduled for 2 p.m. "Julian," I replied calmly, "as you clearly instructed me during our meeting on March 18th, the deployment pipeline is proprietary tooling created outside my standard duties. You specifically ordered me to stick to my official job description and leave deployment tooling for Trevor Blake. I am adhering to your explicit command." "Bradley," Julian said, his voice dropping, "do not play semantics with me. I obviously meant that you should keep the deployment pipeline running until Trevor starts." "With all due respect, Julian, that is not what you said or documented. You told me to focus exclusively on user accounts, server patches, and help desk escalations. Today alone, I have provisioned 16 user accounts, patched 11 Linux servers, and resolved 4 Tier 3 tickets. I am fulfilling my job description with 100% compliance. If you wish to expand my job duties to include custom infrastructure software engineering, we will need to execute a formal contract modification with appropriate compensation adjustments. Listen to me very carefully, Bradley, Julian hissed. I am your chief technology officer. I am ordering you to fix that pipeline right now. We will sort out the paperwork later. I am unable to perform work outside my formal contractual scope without written authorization and modified compensation terms, I stated politely. Good luck with the deployment, Julian. I hung up the phone. At 2 p.m. sharp, Apex officially missed the mandatory delivery deadline for the $7.4 million Davenport integration project. At 2:47 p.m., an emergency email blast went out from Vice President of Engineering Valerie Ross demanding a status update. I responded to Valerie's email within 2 minutes, attaching Sandra Higgins's role clarification memo and stating, "This infrastructure tooling falls outside my official role scope per CTO Julian Thorne's instructions. Please coordinate directly with Julian Thorne." That was only the beginning of the collapse. On Tuesday morning, March 25th, at 9:18 a.m., our core customer database cluster suffered a severe memory leak, driving central processing unit usage to 100% and causing database query latency. Under normal circumstances, my custom telemetry dashboard would have detected the anomaly within 2 minutes, automatically triggered failover scripts, and alerted the on-call engineer. However, the monitoring dashboard relied on an enterprise third-party telemetry processing license that required manual renewal every 90 days. The renewal deadline had been March 25th at 8 a.m. Managing enterprise software licenses fell under vendor management, a responsibility Julian Thorne had officially stripped from my hands. Because Julian had no technical understanding of the architecture, he had ignored automated renewal warnings forwarded to his inbox. The third-party license expired at 8 a.m. The custom monitoring dashboard went dark. For 41 solid minutes, the database failure went undetected by engineering leadership. By the time customer support representatives received frantic calls from corporate clients, 23 major enterprise customers were experiencing service outages. Apex's service level agreements guaranteed 99.9% monthly uptime. In less than 45 minutes, Apex blew through its quarterly error budget, exposing the firm to hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalty credits. Julian sent me an angry Slack message at 10:02 a.m. Julian Thorne, why did the monitoring system fail to send an alert about the database outage? Why was the dashboard offline? Bradley Vance. The monitoring dashboard license expired at 8 a.m. today. As stated in our March 18th meeting, vendor relationship management and license renewals now report directly to your office. I assumed your office had processed the renewal. Julian Thorne. You built that dashboard, Bradley. You should have reminded me that the license was expiring. Bradley Vance. Maintaining vendor renewal schedules is not included in my 2011 Level 2 Systems Administrator job description. I am following your explicit instruction to stick strictly to my assigned duties. Julian did not reply. By Wednesday, March 26th, the infrastructure was disintegrating. Our monthly Amazon Web Services cloud computing bill arrived, showing an immediate 22% increase in computing costs, representing an unexpected $30,000 monthly budget overrun. On March 18th, I had disabled my custom automated cloud instance optimization scripts that dynamically adjusted server reservation allocations. My custom script saved Apex $30,000 every month, but writing cloud optimization algorithms was not in my job description. That same afternoon, Cloudflare Edge Security issued an automated bulletin requiring an immediate update to our Layer 7 distributed denial of service mitigation rules. I forwarded the bulletin directly to Julian Thorne's inbox. Julian did not understand what a Layer 7 mitigation rule was and forwarded it to Valerie Ross, who forwarded it back to me. I replied to Valerie, "This is an edge infrastructure vendor management matter under CTO Julian Thorne's exclusive mandate. The Cloudflare security rule was never updated. On Thursday morning, March 27th, at 7:45 a.m., a coordinated Layer 7 distributed denial of service attack targeted Apex's public application programming interfaces. Without updated Cloudflare mitigation rules in place, our customer portals were overwhelmed with malicious traffic. API response times degraded by over 300%. For 4 hours, Apex's platform crawled. Customer support lines were jammed with 89 frantic enterprise complaints. 3 major corporate clients threatened immediate legal action and contract cancellation under the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Framework and commercial breach provisions. At 2:34 p.m. on Thursday afternoon, an urgent calendar invite landed in my inbox. Meeting subject: Emergency Infrastructure Continuity and Role Reassessment. Time: 3:58 p.m. Location: Executive Boardroom. Mandatory attendees: Bradley Vance, Julian Thorne, VP of Engineering Valerie Ross, HR Director Sandra Higgins, Board Advisor Eleanor Wright, and Senior Corporate Legal Counsel Douglas Abbott. The corporate showdown had finally arrived. At precisely 3:58 p.m. on Thursday, March 27th, I walked into Executive Boardroom A, carrying a black leather briefcase. The atmosphere inside the boardroom was suffocatingly tense. Julian Thorne sat at the side of the mahogany table, looking pale and exhausted. Next to him, Vice President of Engineering Valerie Ross was typing furiously on her laptop. Sandra Higgins sat quietly with her HR folder open. Sitting at the head of the table were 2 individuals who did not attend routine engineering meetings. Eleanor Wright, former chairwoman of the board of directors who now served as chief board advisor, and Douglas Abbott, Apex's chief outside legal counsel specializing in intellectual property disputes and Delaware corporate governance. Julian Thorne immediately cleared his throat and initiated the attack. Bradley, Julian began, his voice raspy with stress. We are standing in the middle of an operational disaster. Over the past 6 days, our deployment pipeline has crashed, halting the $7.4 million Davenport integration. Our telemetry monitoring system went dark, causing service-level agreement breaches across 23 enterprise accounts. Our cloud infrastructure costs surged by $30,000 this week alone, and this morning, we suffered a 4-hour distributed denial of service attack. Every single time management asks you to resolve these failures, you refuse to work, claiming it is not your job. I set my briefcase on the table, opened the latches, and looked Julian directly in his eyes. That is entirely correct, Julian, I stated calmly. On March 18th, in Conference Room D, you and Sandra Higgins formally presented me with my 2011 job description. You explicitly instructed me that maintaining deployment pipelines, managing cloud vendors, overseeing monitoring tools, and handling security architecture were outside my official role. You commanded me, in front of HR, to stick strictly to my job description. I have obeyed your executive commands with absolute compliance. Valerie Ross leaned forward. Bradley, we all appreciate compliance, but you built these core systems. You know how to fix them. The entire company is currently imploding because these systems are down. I turned to Valerie with professional respect. Valerie, I built those systems on my own initiative over 13 years to help this company succeed. But when your new chief technology officer explicitly strips me of operational authority and orders me to perform basic administrative tasks, I am professionally obligated to obey that management boundary. Douglas Abbott, the corporate attorney, adjusted his glasses. Mr. Vance, Douglas asked in a measured legal tone, are you formally refusing to perform operational duties essential to the ongoing business operations of Apex Infrastructure Systems? No. Mr. Abbott, I replied smoothly. I am performing 100% of the duties defined in my legal employment contract with total diligence. If Apex desires for me to perform specialized software engineering, cloud architecture, and infrastructure management outside my Level 2 systems administrator contract, Apex must execute a new contract with appropriate compensation and legal protections. Julian Thorne slammed his palm against the mahogany table. This is blatant corporate extortion and sabotage, he shouted, his face turning red. You are deliberately holding our infrastructure hostage. I will have you terminated for gross misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty effective immediately. I did not flinch. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out a blue legal folder, and slid a 10-page document across the mahogany table directly to Douglas Abbott and Eleanor Wright. "Before you discuss termination or breach of fiduciary duty, Julian," I said softly, "I strongly suggest that corporate counsel examine that contract." Julian frowned, staring at the document. "What on earth is that?" "That," I declared, "is the key person retention and intellectual property assignment agreement executed on June 12, 2015, signed by former Chief Technology Officer Franklin Miller, former board chairwoman Eleanor Wright, and myself. It is formally archived under Q2 2015 board minutes in the corporate registry." At the mention of 2015, Eleanor Wright's sharp gray eyes locked onto mine. A subtle nod of recognition passed over her face. She remembered. Douglas Abbott opened the legal folder and began reading the document intently. Beside him, Eleanor Wright leaned over to inspect the signature page. Julian Thorne looked back and forth between the attorney and the board advisor, his confidence rapidly dissolving into visible dread. "Is that agreement legally binding, Douglas?" Julian asked, his voice shaking slightly. "Did the board actually approve something like that?" Eleanor Wright spoke up, her voice commanding and absolute. "Yes, Julian. The board approved it unanimously in 2015. Franklin Miller brought the proposal to us because Bradley had independently engineered our entire deployment framework. We faced immense key person vulnerability. We executed this agreement under Delaware corporate law to guarantee that Bradley's personal intellectual property was protected and that he remained incentivized to stay with Apex." Douglas Abbott turned a page of the contract, his face growing pale. He looked up and looked directly at Julian Thorne. "Julian," Douglas said gravely, "this agreement is ironclad and fully enforceable under Delaware law and federal copyright statutes under Title 17 of the United States Code. Section 106. "What does that mean for us?" Valerie Ross asked anxiously. Douglas Abbott cleared his throat and explained the legal reality. "Under the terms of this 2015 agreement, Mr. Vance retains sole personal intellectual property ownership of the Continuous Deployment Pipeline Code, the custom telemetry dashboard architecture, and the automated cloud optimization scripts. Apex was granted a non-exclusive operational license to use his software. However, Clause 4 explicitly states that Apex cannot transfer management of these tools to another employee without Mr. Vance's express written consent. Furthermore, Clause 7 states that if Apex alters Mr. Vance's role or attempts to strip him of operational control, Apex must either negotiate a fair market value intellectual buyout or immediately cease all utilization of Mr. Vance's proprietary software." Julian Thorne stared at the attorney in disbelief. "You are telling me we cannot even run our own deployment pipeline without his permission?" "Legally?" Douglas Abbott replied coldly. "If Mr. Vance revokes Apex's operational license today due to your material alteration of his job duties, Apex cannot deploy a single line of code without committing willful copyright infringement and misappropriation of trade secrets under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1836. A suffocating silence descended upon executive boardroom. Julian Thorne looked as though he might throw up. Valerie Ross covered her face with her hands. Sandra Higgins sat frozen in shock. Eleanor Wright looked across the table at me. "So Bradley," Eleanor said quietly, "how is fair market buyout value defined in the contract?" I opened my notebook and referred to my financial metrics. Under Clause 8 of the board agreement, I stated, "Fair market value is defined as no less than 3 times the documented annual operational cost savings generated by the custom intellectual property." I laid out the mathematical figures clearly for the boardroom. First, the automated deployment pipeline saves Apex 40 hours of senior engineering labor per week, totaling 2,000 hours per year. At $80 per hour, that represents $160,000 in annual labor savings. 3 times annual savings equals $480,000. Second, the custom telemetry monitoring dashboard reduced outage detection time from 17 minutes to under 3 minutes, preventing an estimated $220,000 in annual service level agreement penalty credits. 3 times annual savings equals $660,000. Third, My automated cloud optimization scripts saved Apex $30,000 per month in Amazon Web Services expenses, representing $360,000 in annual cloud savings. 3 times annual savings equals $1.08 million. Fourth, my proprietary edge routing scripts save $300,000 annually in emergency contractor fees. 3 times annual savings equals $900,000. The total contractual buyout value of my intellectual property, I concluded, stands at precisely $3,120,000. Julian Thorne gasped for air. $3.1 million? That is preposterous. We could just hire external software developers to build new pipelines from scratch. You certainly could try, Julian, I replied calmly. But let me ask Vice President Valerie Ross a practical engineering question. Valerie, how long would it take an external team to reverse engineer, rewrite, test, and deploy a completely new deployment pipeline and telemetry dashboard for our enterprise infrastructure? Valerie Ross looked at Julian with brutal honesty. Minimum 6 months, Julian. More likely 9 to 12 months. And during those 9 months, we would have to freeze all software releases completely. And what happens to Apex during those 9 months? I added smoothly. If you cannot deploy code for 9 months, you immediately breach your $7.4 million Davenport integration contract. You breach your service-level agreements with 14 enterprise corporate clients, exposing Apex to over $18 million in contractual default claims and client cancellations. Furthermore, under the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Framework, the Board of Directors would face catastrophic personal liability for operational gross negligence. Douglas Abbott nodded slowly in total agreement. Mr. Vance's legal and economic analysis is entirely accurate. If Apex litigates this agreement, we will lose in Delaware Chancery Court. Our software operations will be enjoined by federal court order, and financial liability will exceed $20 million. Julian Thorne slumped back in his chair, completely crushed. The arrogant executive who had commanded me to stick to my job description 6 days ago was now completely ruined. Eleanor Wright stood up from the head of the table. She looked at Douglas Abbott, then at Valerie Ross, and finally at me. Bradley, Eleanor said, her voice filled with absolute authority. If we negotiate a settlement today, what are your terms? I looked Eleanor in the eye and delivered my exact conditions. First, Apex will pay a negotiated lump sum intellectual property buyout of $2,800,000, paid out in equal monthly installments over 24 consecutive months. Second, my corporate title will be immediately reclassified to Principal Infrastructure Systems Architect, reporting directly to Vice President of Engineering Valerie Ross, bypassing Julian Thorne entirely. Third, my base compensation will be adjusted to $195,000 per year, accompanied by a 20% annual executive bonus target. Fourth, I will retain final written architectural approval authority over all core software infrastructure, cloud contracts, and deployment pipelines at Apex Infrastructure Systems. Eleanor Wright looked at Julian Thorne, then looked back at me. Bradley, keep our infrastructure running for the next 24 hours while I convene an emergency meeting of the Board of Directors. Effective immediately, Apex will retain you on an expert consulting basis at a rate of $250 per hour for any infrastructure work performed outside your current job description. I closed my briefcase and smiled. That is entirely acceptable. Eleanor, the emergency meeting of the Board of Directors took place via secure video conference. At 8 o'clock the following morning, Friday, March 28, 2025. As I learned later from Valerie Ross, Eleanor Wright and Douglas Abbott presented the board with 2 stark options. Option A, authorize the $2.8 million intellectual property buyout and promote Bradley Vance to Principal Infrastructure Systems Architect, restoring operational stability, saving the $7.4 million Davenport integration, and preserving $18 million in enterprise client revenues. Option B, reject the settlement, face immediate federal copyright injunctions under Title 17 of the United States Code, shut down software deployments for a full year, forfeit millions in client lawsuits, and face complete corporate bankruptcy. The Board of Directors voted unanimously to approve option A in less than 15 minutes. At 11:47 a.m. on Friday, March 28th, an official email arrived in my inbox from Sandra Higgins in Human Resources. Attached was a formal legal contract titled Executive Promotion and Intellectual Property Acquisition Agreement. The agreement incorporated every single condition I had demanded. The $2,800,000 intellectual property buyout, structured as 24 monthly payments of $116,666.67. Promotion to Principal Infrastructure Systems Architect, reporting directly to Vice President Valerie Ross. Baseline annual salary of $195,000, plus a 20% annual performance bonus. Final architectural approval authority over all enterprise infrastructure. Furthermore, tucked onto page 9 of the contract was an unexpected executive bonus added directly by Eleanor Wright and the board of directors. In profound recognition of Mr. Bradley Vance's foundational technical contributions to Apex Infrastructure Systems, the company hereby grants Mr. Vance 15,000 fully vested corporate stock options at a strike price of $18.40 per share. I read every single sentence of the 10-page contract carefully and signed the agreement on Monday morning, March 31st, 2025, at 9 a.m. in the executive suite. Eleanor Wright and Valerie Ross were present to shake my hand. Julian Thorne was conspicuously absent. On April 15, 2025, at precisely 2:22 p.m., I received a mobile banking notification on my phone. The very first monthly intellectual property installment of $116,666.67 cleared into my savings account. I sat at my workstation by the server room, looked at the balance on my screen, and felt an incredible sense of professional validation. Julian Thorne's corporate career at Apex was effectively over. 6 weeks after the boardroom showdown, having been stripped of all meaningful authority over engineering and infrastructure, Julian quietly tendered his resignation. On his final afternoon at Apex, Julian packed his belongings into a cardboard box and quietly exited the building without saying goodbye to anyone. When Trevor Blake, our incoming DevOps manager, started his role in April, he was assigned to report directly to me. Trevor turned out to be an incredibly talented senior engineer. Together, we modernized the automated deployment pipeline, upgraded the telemetry monitoring dashboard, renewed our Cloudflare Edge security protocols, and optimized our cloud architecture. With our infrastructure running at peak efficiency, Apex successfully delivered the Davenport Integration Project 2 days ahead of schedule, securing the $7.4 million enterprise contract. The sales and executive team celebrated with champagne in the main atrium. Valerie Ross personally walked over to my desk and handed me a rare bottle of single malt Scotch whiskey, accompanied by a handwritten card that read, "Bradley, thank you for saving this company from its own foolishness." 18 months later, in October 2026, Apex Infrastructure Systems was acquired by a major global tech conglomerate in an all-cash transaction valued at $340 million, because my 15,000 corporate stock options had vested immediately. Back in March 2025, the acquisition yielded me an additional $247,000 after all. Federal and state taxes were settled. Fast forward to today, February 2026. I am still serving as Principal Infrastructure Systems Architect at our expanded enterprise firm. I currently lead a dedicated team of 8 senior infrastructure engineers, building out next-generation cloud architecture. Management listens to our guidance, respects our technical boundaries, and consults our team before making any major corporate decisions. The $2,800,000 intellectual property payout was fully completed in March 2026. I invested the vast majority of those funds into conservative index funds and real estate, and purchased a beautiful 3-bedroom ranch home situated on 5 acres in the Texas Hill Country just outside Austin. It is quiet, peaceful, and surrounded by oak trees. As for Julian Thorne, I saw a recent update on LinkedIn a few months ago. The startup he had joined in San Francisco failed to secure Series A venture capital funding and closed its doors after 11 months. On her final day serving as board advisor last year, Eleanor Wright sent me a brief email. She wrote, Bradley, Franklin Miller and I knew exactly what we were doing when we signed that retention agreement with you back in 2015. Corporate executives far too often forget that dedicated, skilled people matter infinitely more than rigid organizational charts. I am deeply glad it worked out the way it did. I think about Eleanor's words often. Corporate leadership frequently fails to recognize the quiet, invisible labor that keeps complex organizations alive. Executive managers see high-level revenue figures, customer accounts, and marketing presentations, but they remain completely blind to the silent, automated systems built by dedicated engineers working behind the scenes. When you possess deep technical mastery over core systems, and when you protect your work with solid legal contracts, you hold immense structural power. You simply have to possess the patience, courage, and tactical discipline to exercise that power when arrogant management attempts to push you around. Julian Thorne thought he was modernizing Apex by putting me back into a narrow corporate box. He commanded me to stick to my job description, believing it would diminish my standing. But he failed to realize that the box he designed was far too small for the massive infrastructure I had spent 13 years building. I never intended to ruin Julian Thorne. I simply gave him exactly what he asked for: flawless, absolute compliance with his own orders. And in doing so, the corporate world learned a lesson it will not soon forget. When you tell the person who maintains your foundation to stop working, you had better be prepared for the entire house to come crashing down. Thank you for listening to my story. If you believe in workplace justice and standing up for your true value against arrogant management, make sure to hit the subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments below.